unnecessary tension for no reason.
Donald Trump's own behavior has endangered Taiwan. Donald Trump has bombed 10 countries in 1 year. 8 of those 10 have fewer than 100 million population. 7 of that 8, less than 50%. He's picking on small players.
Hey, welcome back to the channel, my friends. So glad you're here with me tonight. So tonight, we're walking into a roundtable that got heated real fast. We've got a panel breaking down the recent summit between the president and Xi Jinping, and the room is split right down the middle. On one side, conservative voices like Emily and Joe insisting the president is the big dog at the table who just bullied China into submission. On the other side, liberal panelists laying out a completely different reality, calling out everything from bombing campaigns to the president's strange habit of fighting people he can't actually bully while ignoring the ones he can. And trust me, this debate gets sharp fast. Make sure you stick around all the way through, because the moments toward the end honestly hit harder than the opening, and I do not want you missing them. And before we get rolling, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're tuning in from tonight. I love seeing how far this channel reaches, and it genuinely makes my day every single time. All right, enough from me. Let's get into it.
If Xi Jinping wanted to help, he would have said, here's what I can do to help, and here's what I'm going to do. When he says, I'll do whatever I can to help, that is diplomatic code for saying, I'm not going to get involved in any of this. This is your mess, you fix it. He is now establishing that I'm the big dog in this room, and I'm putting down these markers.
I believe that she is just using the theatrics to make him look good in front of the Chinese media. But let's be real. If there's a big dog at any table, it's President Donald Trump. And no, let's be honest with ourselves. You might not like him, but you have to agree he is crazy and nobody wants to mess with him. And in a world full of crazies, you might just have to no, of course. First of all, our military capabilities has just been proven with Iran. We've interjected arguably in too many wars, and if there's one person who really is not in a place to be making demands, it's President Xi. So that's why I just believe it's all words. He's not going to do anything. I agree with the U.S.'s stance on the ambiguity when it comes to Taiwan. I also feel that they're choosing that way because I don't believe they actually think she will do anything. So why create unnecessary tension for no reason?
Donald Trump's own behavior has endangered Taiwan. Donald Trump has bombed 10 countries in 1 year. 8 of those 10 have fewer than 100 million population. 7 of that 8, less than 50%. He's picking on small players. What does that message send to other big, powerful countries about other countries that they may want to invade? Exactly. What does it say to Russia about Ukraine?
Why are you talking about all the ceasefires
I'm just saying.
You're focusing on
when you start the war, and then you stop it and call it a problem.
Gaza. Wait, excuse me. None of these wars started under Donald Trump. Besides
the 10 bombings started under Donald Trump.
Obama dropped the bomb every 27 minutes.
On 10 countries?
Hold on a second, Emily.
No, you don't know the answer to that question. That's what the problem is.
Okay, let me just
So a couple things. Joe, you've forgotten that Biden actually was routinely criticized for taking too tough a line on China and Taiwan. So the exact opposite of what you're saying.
What did he do after he was told that?
Bingo.
Oh my God, you're totally missing the point. The point is that Donald Trump
has
told
me.
He
said
no.
Biden said don't.
No.
That's what he did.
Read the readout of what he said after he was told, I'm going to take over Taiwan.
Go to Google at home. You're just wrong about this.
I pulled it up. I'll read it to you.
Okay, well, then you should read a little deeper. Second thing,
Trump
has done a consistent yellow light on Taiwan since he flip-flopped on TikTok after getting a huge campaign donation to the 2024 campaign, which he believes helped him win election. Third, Xi is bringing him into sort of a strategic patience détente mindset, using rare earths as a way to sort of mollify the U.S. That is not a position of strength. He's got time on his side because he's a dictator for life. And Donald Trump has hurt America's strength in the region by alienating our allies and driving a lot of allies to China.
China having all the semiconductors. And that's from a selfish perspective.
When you say that Donald Trump is always the big dog in the room, right? So the Chinese government has basically said that the Iran war is an illegal war. Xi himself
she is in a place to talk about legalities.
Himself has said that it violates the rule of law, and it is probably. Can you let me finish? Or do you have a problem with talking while people talking? Or
let's just let him finish, and then you can respond.
He's also said that it risks making this the international order into a law rule of the jungle. That was his phrase.
Okay, so right out the gate, Emily is sitting there with a straight face telling us the president is the big dog in the room. The big dog. And you have to understand something. When someone has to keep telling you they're the toughest guy in the room, that is usually the clearest sign that they are not. Real strength doesn't need a press release. Real strength doesn't need theatrics. And the moment Emily said you might not like him, but you have to agree he is crazy and nobody wants to mess with him, I genuinely had to pause, because she just admitted the entire foreign policy strategy is built on being unpredictable and unhinged. That is not strength. That is a coin flip. That is a guy at the poker table going all in on every hand and calling it genius. And then the liberal panelist drops the line that should have ended the entire conversation. She points out that the current president has bombed 10 countries in 1 year. 8 of those 10 have fewer than 100 million people. 7 of those 8 have less than 50 million. Let that sink in for a second. That is not a foreign policy. That is a pattern. That is someone walking through a playground swinging at the smallest kids and calling himself a heavyweight champion. And the second she said it, you could see the conservative side scramble. Joe immediately tries to deflect with the Obama dropped a bomb every 27 minutes line. And look, I'm not here to defend any past administration's military record, but this is what people in debates do when they have no answer. They throw a comparison out hoping you forget the original point. And here is the part that blows my mind. The liberal panelist comes back with the most surgical fact check of the night. She reminds Joe that the previous administration was actually criticized for being too tough on China and Taiwan, the exact opposite of what he was claiming. And Joe's response? Go Google it at home. That is the conservative rebuttal. Go Google it. When you have no facts, when you have no answer, when you have been completely caught out, you tell the other person to do their own research. That is when you know an argument is over.
The Pope didn't say anything like that, right? But he had all the smoke for the Pope, but he has none for Xi Jinping. He's still trying to make him his friend. He is still saying things about the United States being in decline. He refuses to say anything negative about Xi because he's a bully. He knows the Pope can't do anything, doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't have anything to offer him. But he can bully the Pope, but he can't bully Xi, and so he has nothing.
Do you think he should?
But you say he's the big dog in the room.
If Xi is saying there's a declining nation, it is most certainly not the United States.
Emily, let me ask you to respond to what he's saying, which is fundamentally, President Trump doesn't seem to be willing to stand up to Xi Jinping in terms of China's relationship with Iran, in terms of how he's described the United States' military actions with Iran. Why not?
Well, China today, if I'm not mistaken, I saw a big headline on CNN that they said Xi is committing to not send any military weapons to Iran, which is a big step. I mean, we're talking, the bar's pretty low with the countries we're discussing.
He said it last night.
Well, to that, let me just play this because Trump was just talking about this in his interview with Sean Hannity tonight. Let me just play that clip.
He said he's not going to give military equipment. That's a big statement. He said that today. That's a big statement. He said that strongly. But at the same time, he said, they buy a lot of their oil there, and they'd like to keep doing that.
That aired at 9 p.m. last night. 24 hours have passed, and the Chinese have not substantially walked it back. And I think part of me just thinks it must be so exhausting to just constantly be negative Nancy when the bulk of this summit over the past, 48 hours now has been positive. We have agreements on soybeans, on beef, on Boeing. Boeing's going to potentially get 200 planes purchased. That's about a third of the planes that they make in a year. These are positive developments, and we should be rooting for the fact that the president got some commitment on Iran. Yes, they need oil. I know that part, right?
Listen, the economic positives are there. Nobody's arguing that. We're talking about this kind of diplomatic international policies around use of force, and that is not resolved. And I don't trust first of all, I don't trust anything Donald Trump says. Definitely don't trust until this is confirmed.
They haven't walked it back.
Well, that's not I want to wait until it's confirmed.
Literally what I wrote about today, sorry to self-publicize on my subtitle.
That's fine.
Which is that the Chinese do not sell military equipment to Iran. That's not the problem. The Chinese are never going to sell tanks and planes and bombs directly to Iran. He was not promising, he's promising something that is already true. What they sell is they sell intermediate parts and systems that can be used and are used, that they sell chemicals that with a little bit of tweaking can be used for rocket fuel. They sell satellite imagery which can be used for targeting. He's not committing not to do that. All that still remains on the table. And that oil he buys, that's the money that Iran uses, the Iranian regime uses to buy.
So you think this summit was a net negative for the world? You think this is a net negative for world peace?
Absolutely, it's a net.
Now this is where the entire debate cracks wide open. The liberal panelist looks straight ahead and delivers what I think is the most devastating line of the entire panel. She points out that the president had all the smoke for the Pope, but he has none for Xi Jinping. And the second I heard that, I knew the conservative side had nothing, because she just exposed the entire playbook in one sentence. Tough on the people who can't fight back. Soft on the people who actually have power. That is not leadership. That is the textbook definition of being a bully, and bullies are the most fragile people in the room. Let me break down why this matters so much, because Emily then tries to spin a win out of thin air. She says China is committing to not send military weapons to Iran and acts like this is some massive diplomatic breakthrough. And then the China expert on the panel walks in and demolishes it in real time. He explains he was not promising. He's promising something that is already true, because China was never going to ship tanks and bombers directly to Iran in the first place. The expert lays out what China actually sells: intermediate parts, chemicals that with a little bit of tweaking can be used for rocket fuel, satellite imagery that gets used for targeting. None of that was on the table in the so-called commitment. Zero of it. And here is what people don't realize. The whole conflict with Iran should never have escalated the way it did. Iran has been a country that has been pressured, sanctioned, isolated, and bombed for decades, and they have legitimate reasons to be skeptical of any deal coming out of the West. So, when the conservative side acts like Iran is the villain and any concession from China about Iran is a victory, they are skipping over the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that the United States escalated, dropped bombs, and now wants the world to applaud when a rival superpower agrees not to do something they were never doing anyway. That is not winning. That is theater. And quick history lesson real fast. Back in 1972, when Nixon went to Beijing, that summit produced the Shanghai Communique, an actual document, an actual strategic framework that reshaped the global order for decades. That is what a real summit looks like. What we just watched, soybean orders and a fake promise. The bar has fallen through the floor.
Whenever America looks weak on the world stage, when America looks,
Trump calls people like you a panicking because everything's a nightmare, everything's a problem.
Even Trump is the first president in a decade to even go to Beijing.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
So look, I mean, I think that the question is, what really are we going to get out of this? Okay, we're not quite there yet. We don't really know what the deliverables are, but we do know, and I think based on, as Bobby pointed out, we know exactly what China wants. And what they want is for us to change our position on Taiwan. They want more access to our semiconductor chips. And according to Marco Rubio tonight, he told NBC, the president didn't ask Xi Jinping for anything. We are not asking for China's help. So what are we going to get in exchange for any concessions that we might?
So clearly the gains are economic, and that's under a rubric of stability on China's terms. Here's the larger danger. If you look at the threat matrix we're facing today, it's AI, China, and polarization. And when China talks about America being a nation in decline, it's referring to our polarization at home and our isolation from allies abroad. The fact that the Trump administration seems to be increasing access to chips, American-made chips for Chinese AI, is a very big and dangerous deal down the road. It may be short-term benefit for our economy, long-term bad for national security.
And he's already done some of that.
Yes, he has.
He's already made some deals with U.S. companies to allow them to basically get carve-outs.
I just feel that China isn't really, like you were quoting earlier, like she said that Trump is violating law. She said, what is she doing? Is he taking the higher ground here? Is he the good guy in the room? Is he the litmus test? Of course not.
I think that's actually
quoting him as if that's like a credible
Emily, I think that's actually his point. His point is that you're exactly right. That they're not necessarily acting in good faith when it comes to Iran. The question for you that I asked you and that he asked you was, why won't the president say anything about that?
Here's my takeaway from this whole thing. I obviously am no fan of Xi Jinping. Needless to say that. I would still rather my president have more friends than enemies. That includes Xi, that includes
bad news for
Putin.
you.
I know. Listen, I'm not talking about our allies that don't do anything when we need them. That's not who I'm referring to, because then what's the point of having an ally if it's just for social
NATO.
clout? Yeah,
So
I know.
your-
They need to back us up when we
idea
need
of
them.
friendship is to make
Would you
friendship with the
rather
world's
Trump and
dictators.
Xi start beefing with each other? Is that an ideal situation?
I would like.
If that,
I would
Please
rather the
respect
U.S.
strength.
president
Away
have
from the
principles
World War III
that
we
he stands up-
promised in
that he holds up to.
2016
I guess-
and 2020.
I feel like they
I guess
wanted them
if-
to start fighting. That's what I feel.
He's decided that it's just easier to beef with the Pope.
Okay, and this is the part where the whole thing comes together. Emily tries one of the oldest debate tricks in the book. When she runs out of arguments, she starts attacking the energy of the other side. She says it must be so exhausting to just constantly be negative, Nancy, and I'm sorry, but that is the response of someone who has lost the substance of the argument. When you can't beat the facts, you attack the tone. That is what people do when they have nothing left in the tank. And then the conversation turns to what I think is the scariest point of the entire panel. The liberal panelist lays out the actual threat matrix: AI, China, and polarization. 3 things. And then she explains that the current administration is increasing access to American-made chips for Chinese AI. She says it may be short-term benefit for our economy, long-term bad for national security. And when asked if this has already happened, the answer is yes, he has. He's already made some deals with U.S. companies to allow them to basically get carve-outs. That is a national security concern that should be making everyone pay attention, regardless of where you sit politically. Because chips are not soybeans. Chips are the foundation of the next century. You don't trade those for headlines. And then Emily delivers what is supposed to be her closing argument, and it is genuinely one of the strangest things I've heard on a panel in a long time. She says she would rather her president have more friends than enemies. That includes Xi, friends with Xi Jinping, the leader who locks up journalists, runs the most aggressive surveillance state in human history, and is openly preparing to absorb Taiwan. That is who she wants as a friend. Meanwhile, when she's asked about NATO, she hand-waves it. So the actual democratic allies who have stood with the U.S. for 70-plus years are disposable. But the authoritarian we're supposed to be checking is the new buddy. The values are completely upside down. And the closer, the perfect closer. The liberal panelist says he's decided that it's just easier to beef with the Pope. And honestly, that sentence is the entire administration in 9 words. Pick on the people who can't fight back. Cozy up to the people who actually scare you. That is not strength. That is not leadership. That is a posture. And the world is watching, and the world knows the difference. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.